Okay, so as we just said before, I am a fellow heart parent. I work in HR in the daytime, and I have done for about 15, 16 years now. I did my undergrad in business management, and then I did my specialism in HR, and then I did my master's. Even though I had two children at that time, I was like, woohoo, let's take the weight of the world on and let's do a master's, because we're not got anything better to do. So I did my master's, and it should have took me, I think it should have taken me 2 or 3 years, and it took me 4 years in the end. Um, so I did that in HR, and then I got my level 7 CIPD accreditation, which means that I have access to the current world of HR, and I am accredited with the work and advice that I offer. Um, so a little bit about me then. I support leaders and employees in the education world, but I've worked across all different sectors, even in not for profit, and actually in one of my governor roles, where I am a governor at an SEN college. Their sister company was my very first HR job. So I've come full circle in that I started off there when I was doing my undergrad, and now I'm a governor at their specialist employability college, which feels really nice. So I do lots of workplace matters, including absence, well-being, performance, weird and wonderful situations as well. What I call popcorn moments, when you hear about something that is very, very different and not the norm. It requires a good long sit down. So every day is very different in the work that I do. But then alongside that as well, I am a parent who I have 3 children, and 2 of those do have supraventricular tachycardia. My eldest there, you can see on the left hand side, he's just turned 13, and his heart condition was discovered when he was about 10 days old. And at that moment in time, I was a new mum. It was like an episode of Casualty. I always explain to people it was just the most out of body experience I think I'd ever been through at that point. And looking back now, it was actually a really straightforward journey that we had with Jacob and his heart health, because Ezra's experience was drastically different. But I'll talk more about that on the next slide. I think what I am really passionate about is trying to offer a non-judgmental approach to people's scenarios, especially having lived experience of that, but then also trying to balance that with the business need. And in any industry, there is always a business need. Even in education, we're there to serve the children. So if there are issues that affect us being able to educate children, then that's still a strategic thing to consider. So the landscape's different, but the core of it is very similar. And what I've seen time and time again in every single industry that I've worked in is that people don't necessarily need massive complex interventions. And I think sometimes managers get really sort of hung up on the small stuff, and they think that what they need to do is a really big thing, but it isn't. They just need to be understanding. There's so many people that I speak to, and they are so relieved that, oh, this person understands, this person knows about this, and it is such a different experience when you feel like someone understands you. Having a bit of flexibility, if that's possible, goes a long way. For sure. I mean, even in education, you think, oh, you can't be that flexible, but there definitely is flexibility that exists. And again, consistency as well. Ultimately, at the heart of every decision, you need to make sure that you are consistent and that you're treating people fairly, ultimately. So from my experience of dealing with children with heart conditions is, as I said before, my first experience was very straightforward. He responded really well to medication. He's just there, just turned 13. He's living his best life. He's doing really well. He has. I'm not going to say this right, but there is I think it's the foramen ovale valve. I think it's on the top of the heart. His hasn't closed, which means that if he ever wants to do deep sea diving, then he's going to have an operation. So that is about as drastic as it gets for my eldest, which is, you know, a far cry from our experience when he was first born. And then I had another child, Harper. She's a girl, and she escaped the faulty heart gene, we explain, because people are quite shocked to hear that we have two children living with a heart condition. And then we had Ezra, and Ezra is 4 now. He just turned 4 December last year. His experience was, I think I still have PTSD from thinking about all of that. And even though both of my boys have the same heart condition, Ezra's journey has been drastically different. He was born via an emergency section. His fetal heart rate was too high. I was put to sleep and he was delivered. There was other things that weren't quite right when he was born. I didn't get to meet him for like 15 hours, which is just awful experience. And he didn't respond very well to medication for a while. So we got transferred to St Mary's Hospital in Manchester. We finally got his medication. His medication was controlling his heart condition, and we came out of hospital 2 weeks later. We was back in. We was on HDU, ICU. We was trying all sorts of medication, and I remember the consultant stood. I was sat on a chair, and I remember he stood up and we was talking about medication because he said he wanted to find one drug that would work, and we wasn't at that point, so we had to find 2. And I remember he stood there and he said, "But you've been through this before." And at that moment, I'll never forget it. I thought, no, actually, I haven't. I haven't been through this before, because my first son responded very well to his medication, and it was level entry medication. It was never last resort, which it was for Ezra, and then it was last resort plus another. So when you're on ICU and you're thinking, well, where do we go from here? No, actually, I haven't been in this position before. So that always sticks with me, because as much as I felt like the cardiac team at Manchester knew our family, our first cardiologist told us just to have another child, because she must have perceived us to be some neurotic parents that's really concerned about their child's heart, you know, that thing that keeps them alive.
Yeah.
So yeah, they knew us and still do know us quite well as a family. So it was a really stressful time. There was so much uncertainty. You have then the side effects of the medication as well. So Ezra was put on amiodarone, which is not a very good drug to be on. He was on that for about 7 months, which now means he has to have regular eye tests as a result, because you can experience ocular deposits when he was on it. We had to be really careful in the sun, etc. So it's not just being on medication and having a stable condition, it's all of the other things that come with it, which I think is where a lot of people are frustrated by other people's lack of awareness and understanding on that. Being in that constant state of vigilance as well, that sound of the monitor, that beeping noise, will haunt me forever. If I ever hear it on the TV, it instantly makes me sweat, because we would spend days looking at that monitor and listening to those sounds. Even when I hear ambulance, you know, it makes me feel really triggered, and that takes a lot of time, and I think a lot of work to sort of move past that. So again, that's another sort of grounding moment to think, yes, on the outside it seems like we're managing really well, but actually you've got no idea what's going on behind the scenes. There's a lot that people are processing and managing and having to cope with. Never mind having to order medication and make sure you've got enough in. And then you've got school saying, oh, we've only got enough for one dose left. And I'm like, are you joking me? Why are you telling me right now? So yeah, even certain people who you'd expect to understand sometimes don't. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is I completely understand exactly what that emotional load looks like, the planning, the constant awareness, and the effort it takes to just keep showing up. I remember when my oldest was young, he had such a bad immune system because there was other things going on as well. So I would avoid going to the play centre. I would avoid being around people that are poorly, because you're not just thinking about your own sanity. You're thinking about, well, what if they get poorly? What if that happens? Then there's going to be an admission. Then we're going to end up in hospital. Then it's going to trigger his heart. So there's so much more that comes with having poorly children, and that's not just heart health, that's across the board. So I touched on before, understanding heart conditions. I think not everybody is going to understand, and I think a lot of parents that I know that have poorly children, they always feel like it's easier to say nothing than it is to say something. I have a friend who runs a children's heart charity, and she, on the face of it, she's like, yes, I'm okay, yes, I'm good. But then when you start to peel that away, you realize that actually she's dealing with a lot. And that's someone who runs her own charity doing it, and she's still dealing with the effects of what she's got going on in her own life. So having that level of understanding, I think, really, really helps. I know that the Rebecca will probably be able to give an update on it, but on the website we've still got the fact sheets, I think, haven't we, Rebecca? I know that people can then print off and take into work or pass on to school and whatnot. Yeah,
yes,
and
yeah.
they've been reviewed, haven't they, recently? So they'll be up to date.
Yes, I believe they are being reviewed. I
Oh,
don't know if they have been the new updates have been
yeah,
included on the website yet, but they're
yeah,
still usable, and then
yeah,
they will be being updated.
yeah. So I find that having those fact sheets and having them printed, like I will give them to scouts. Like when my son's been on his scout camp, I will give the printed sheets to them, because as much as they're not going to take in me verbally telling them exactly what this condition looks like, at least they can digest that in their own time as well. So I find that helps people understand what heart conditions are, and they're very different for everyone, as we know. The unpredictability of it as well. You can go from one day being absolutely fine to the next not, and that's the same for any condition. So for people to have an awareness of what that might look like would be quite useful. I know that really positive conversations come from employees and staff sitting with their line managers and saying, this is what my day looks like now, but this is what my day can also look like tomorrow. And that's really useful to have that conversation, understanding what that impact looks like as well. Is it just you that needs to be present if school call or if college calls or whatever, or do you have a support network? So yeah, those for me, in my experience, those types of understanding of those different areas, I think, is really, really useful as well. And I know that sometimes when you feel like a broken record, I've been there myself. You think, oh, I've explained this, I'm sick of saying this, and then you think, oh, am I doing it justice? Am I explaining it how it needs to be explained? So I think that's why the different formats really helps. I've always relied on the fact sheets that I can find online, so those are really useful to have as well. Um, so the impact on work, I think you might be able to relate to some of these, is there's such a significant impact on your own well-being, physically, emotionally. There are your attendance can then become unpredictable as a result of that, especially when things change quickly. I know, even just like with my children, we got back from holiday last week, and then my middle one was being sick, and I was thinking, oh, she's not in school, it's fine, I can work from home. She's not then going to worry about her attendance, even though she's only 10, and that means the world to her. Even your attendance challenges can be your child's attendance challenges are difficult sometimes in the workplace as well. Having your capacity as an individual, I find that myself, one day I feel like I can take the weight of the world on my shoulder, and then the next day I'm like, no, I'm done now. I'm just done with the world. Get off. So it is really hard, and that happens in work and outside of work. There is constant emotional strain, from whether it's frustrations with the hospital processes or trying to get hold of the prescription that everyone's struggling to get hold of, and having that uncertainty around appointments and waiting for results. I mean, I know myself, Manchester Children's Hospital have changed how they do their Holter monitoring, which for us has been fantastic, because my little one was, and still is, actually really wary of being in hospital environments. Even being in the doctor's room, he won't want to be touched, he won't want to open his mouth, he won't want to be assessed, have his obs taken, and it gets worse and worse. So for you to have to deal with that, all just impacts your working life and what your capacity looks like, and how much you can take on. I know sometimes I'll get my partner to come with me to the hospital just because it makes me feel better. I know that there's a second person there to to spread the load. So there's all those sorts of things, and I know I've seen it myself. Some managers, they'll come across situations and they'll be like, well, can't you, why do you have to go, why can't dad go? And you're like, well, they don't respond as positive to dad in that situation than how they respond to me. And I think it's more of a reflection on them as an individual, as a line manager, is my takeaway from that. But I think it's really hard for people who haven't been through it themselves or witnessed someone going through it to then understand what even the anxiety of the potential impact can look like at work as well. So, but then all in all of this links to employer responsibilities, and this is when I'm going to then start to talk about the legal framework in what employer responsibilities are. But just before I do that, I know I've touched a little bit on workplace perspective, in line manager perspective, just in that conversation then, but I think for me, the impact on someone's well-being is what I think a lot of people struggle with, more so than the pressures or the boundaries of the law and how that fits in. It's, for I think, in my experience and what I've witnessed, it's more about how they manage as an individual, as opposed to what can and can't be done. And I think that for me has been quite an eye-opener, because people accept that policy is policy. But if you don't get an understanding colleague or an understanding line manager or a leader, then I feel like nothing else matters in that situation. So I think having compassion and having that level of understanding is really, really important. Yeah, so there are a couple of laws that are related to family law, and in terms of people having dependents or children or family members with health conditions, and one of them that we would have all heard about is the Equality Act. That's been in place since 2010. Not much has changed about it. There are still protections for staff members from discrimination, and even something called discrimination by association as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just had because we were working from home sort of all the time since 2020. And then when Miles got his diagnosis, I had an informal arrangement to remain at home whilst some people were going in, 1 day a week or whatever. And then our company has sort of restructured and has a new strategy. And they introduced, everybody has to be in 2 days a week. I only work 4 days, as it is. And so I made a flexible working request, and they sort of said, there was going to be a blanket no. It would be a no for everybody. But obviously, I appealed that.
Yeah.
And I did quote, the Equality Act by discrimination by association. It got all the way to appeal hearing with like the CEO of the company, which was extremely daunting for me. I took a more senior colleague with me as sort of support. And because my husband's condensed his hours to be at home on a Friday, I sort of said, right, well, I'd be willing to do a Friday because my husband can be at home and he can be around just in case anything was to happen at school, because that was my main concern, was not being with Miles's HCM being new and as having been called into school last minute on multiple occasions, resulting in ambulance trips and hospital stays. I wanted to be nearby, and also because of the nature of HCM, it sounds awful, but if it was to collapse at school, I'd want to be able to get there in time. I only live 2 minutes from school, so I could potentially get there. So that I went through all that, and we've agreed on one day. So I just do a Friday, but so it's quite on topic. I think they said that my case sort of has made them reflect as a company, so they've actually made some changes to the sort of hybrid setup that they've put out. I think they've realized that they said we can't have a blanket approach, which you certainly cannot have. They have people with all sorts of different situations.
Definitely.
But I think it helped that I quoted this a bit discrimination by association, because that's essentially what they were doing to me.
Do you mind saying what an industry it is that you work in?
So it's quite a niche. So I'm a registered dental nurse, but in 2020 I now work for an indemnity company that provide indemnity to medical and dental professionals, and I manage their cases when they have a case in front of the regulator, or they have a claim for compensation or something like that. So I can do my job absolutely fine. I've done it completely remotely the whole time. I've only been in the office a few times periodically, but that's what I do, and I do the job better at home. And they said it was the first letter, and it's with you saying about a level of understanding from your team lead and so forth. But the team lead that I had recently, when I made the initial flexible working request, he sent a very generic, even though he knew my circumstances, he sent this awful generic decline letter that basically bullet pointed the reasons why I can't, it was refused, which was detrimental effect on the business need and detrimental effect on my performance. There was no empathy towards my situation or anything. So I made sort of like an informal grievance at the end of the process to say I felt that just that lack, if they'd have just shown some empathy to my situation and understanding, would have changed everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Because my team leader that I usually have, her husband died suddenly of, is it long QT syndrome, so the heart condition. He didn't know he had it. And she had complete understanding for my situation, and she was the one I had the informal arrangement with. And then she was off long-term sick leave, and I got this other one that he just sort of said no. He said it went to HR, but I don't even believe that.
No, that's disappointing.
But the stress that I had to go through to get all the way to an appeal hearing, and I think if I hadn't have shown that level of flexibility, like sorting it out with my husband's employer, I still think they'd have pushed back on me, to be totally honest with you.
But at least now, knowing that they've reflected on that, that's really powerful, isn't it? And I think sometimes it does take for one person to stand there with their stick and be like, no, this isn't right. Because I have worked in lots of places, and actually financial places, more so than any other industry, where they are, how can I put this politically? People are just cattle. People
absolutely.
are just a number, and unless you're making that business lots of money, they're not particularly interested in you and your individual needs. So it's an interesting one, because I find that even if that's what the nature of the business is and that's how they approach things, if you have a really good advocate, whether it's a senior leader or your line manager, then that can really make a massive difference. But something that I find quite frustrating actually with flexible working is I notice it myself still, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. But people who have children address and deal with flexible working very different to people who don't have children. So line managers or heads or business development people, whoever it is, they don't understand why people don't want to work like robots every single day of the week. They can't understand why people might want to be a little bit closer to the kids' school. They just can't understand it at all. They're like, well, what are you talking about? You need to be at work. Like, why do you need to work from home? Or why do you need to leave an hour earlier so you can, get home a little bit quicker? Like, they can't understand that. And that's very typical of certain industries. It's very typical of certain people of certain ages as well. But
the corporate setting, and I think even people with healthy children have that mindset to some.
yes,
Like the CEO who I had the appeal hearing with has a child which is perfectly fit and healthy, and she, I think she pretended like she had some level of understanding and empathy, but she was very
not the same.
matter of fact, very corporate, very
sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine.
This is being recorded, isn't it, as well, Rebecca? That's the 3D printer that's just started. So my Jacob has put something to print, and I can hear it going on.
It's all right. We can't hear it.
So I've paused it. So sorry. Oh my gosh, he's been making all sorts of tea bag holders and toothpaste winding things and all sorts. It just started going off then. Sorry about that. But yeah, flexible working, businesses only, it's really difficult to decline flexible working. It really is. And I struggle to understand why some managers don't want to give people flexible working. I worked in an industry once where it was COVID time. It was all people on the phones. It was call center, but they coped through COVID by having people working from home very successfully. And then they wanted everybody back in the office. And then we got, I think it was like 49 flexible working applications through. And it's just ridiculous that people, I think it's ultimately just about having a level of control, but I think that's a reflection on business leaders and line managers, that if you feel like your team aren't performing and you want them to be within your reach, then that's a reflection on you. People can perform very well at home, and if people are happier in their working situation, then they will perform better as well. So if it means you're closer to school, then that makes you feel better in yourself, that you're closer to college, closer to his work, whatever it might be, then you can do your job. Why not allow that to happen? So I struggle to get my head around it. I do work part-time as it stands at the moment, but even, we've got head teachers in our trust that are flexible working because they've got caring responsibilities, and I think they absolutely should be flexible working. So yeah, I completely get it. So it sounds like you know a bit about the discrimination by association as well. So that is concerned when it means when employees are treated less favorably because of someone they care for. So a child with a heart condition, the parent with dementia, or whatever it might be. And that can impact many things, not just flexible working applications. It can affect how someone's absence is managed, whether they're overlooked for opportunities, and as well assumptions being made about how available they are, how committed they are. So yeah, it just feels like there's a thorn in the side in terms of that's not going away anytime soon, I don't think, and it's a real shame because I feel like COVID taught everybody so much. It taught it taught employees to be more concerned about their own health and well-being. It taught businesses, oh, actually, yeah, we can still be successful, and people don't need to be sat in an office every day of the week. And it's a shame, really, that I kind of feel like we've backtracked a little bit from that. But the employment laws, like I said before, they're changing all the time. April and October, there's just been a whole host of changes. Carers leave changed last year as well, which means that people are allowed up to 1 week of unpaid time off to care for someone who has a long-term condition. So yes, it's unpaid, but it means that you can have that time off, and it won't go against you because it's sick leave or whatever it might be. So that was a step in the right direction that happened. I think it was April last year. And then more recently as well, neonatal leave, that came in last year too, I think it was. And that is a statutory right for parents who, if when you have a baby and that baby's admitted to NICU within the first month of their life, but they're in NICU for 7 days, then you get an additional 12 weeks leave on maternity leave, which for me, when I had Ezra and I was in hospital for 3 weeks, I remember being in that moment thinking, that's 3 weeks less of mat leave I've got now, and I'm still in hospital with my baby. So neonatal leave, I think, is absolutely fantastic for people who go through those experiences. It's just something else that they don't need to worry about, because I know when I was in that situation, I felt cheated. I felt I'm having my experience in a hospital when I should be at home enjoying this time with my other children. So I am a huge advocate for that. But the law's the law. That really is just a starting point. As I said before, having compassion and having understanding and being able to apply the law and apply it fairly is something that I always strive for in all of my conversations that I have. And it seems as if they are still people, whether it's a manager or a leader, they've not sought advice. They've just thought, well, this is how it should be. It's a real shame that those situations are happening, because I think in your situation, you probably wouldn't need to have gotten to appeal at that point. But yeah, it goes beyond compliance, basically, is what I'm trying to get at here. And having a bit of flexibility, I think, is massive. Like my youngest, he's going through speech and language. I can be in the office or I can be at home, but I will just leave what I'm doing. I'll take him to Salt and then I'll come back and I'll log on. Like if I wasn't able to have that little bit of flexibility, then I'd have to take annual leave to do that. And that's just silly, because we can just work from home mostly. So yeah, again, communication, using those fact sheets, having the as much as you feel like sometimes, oh, I shouldn't have to be providing all this information in these different formats, sometimes it really just helps. Like I know that me having the healthcare plan for Ezra has helped with applying for his access card. I'm not sure if you've heard of Nimbus accessibility, but you can get an access card, and it's widely recognised, not even just in the UK, but across Europe as well. It's the Sunflower scheme, if you've ever seen that lanyard. So even just having different formats of evidence for whatever it may be is really useful. Asking questions, I think, is a really good one for managers, for them to say to you what support would help you right now, as opposed to you saying, this is how I'm coping, I'm struggling with this, I don't know what to do. I think it really helps if you've got someone who you're speaking to who can ask you those questions, who can actively listen, ask you what would help right now, rather than them making an assumption, or then them going to HR and saying, oh, well, I think this is what she needs, or I think that might work. Sometimes if you're ever in a conversation and you don't feel like that person's asked you those questions, just say it, because sometimes people just don't think. Like there's so many times when managers have come to me and I've said, all right, so what would it look like if that, and do you think she would consider this? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, what? Is that not how a conversation works? Again, flexibility for appointments, adjusting whether it's a start time, I think it just goes such a long way. And this again just reiterates my point at the beginning about people are not asking for big things. They're not asking to be paid £10,000 and not show up for work. Like, we're just asking for small things, and initially having that communication and being compassionate, having a bit of flexibility, and then feeling like you've been treated fairly. Is most importantly, because like with flexible working, for example, even though say Sandra got given her flexible working a request approved, doesn't mean that Sally's going to get it. And I think people think, well she's had it, so then I can ask for it and I can get it. Sadly, that's not how it works. It's not identical. Each flexible working request is ran on its own merit, and it doesn't set precedent for the next one. But what anybody hopes for in that situation is that you're treated fairly. Flexible working has changed now. You can request more than one in any 12-month period. So I hang my hat on thinking that, given that people can make an additional request, means that they have time to be more reflective and they don't have to then go to appeal the way you did. So yeah, I think the laws are getting better for people, but then who knows? It depends on the government, doesn't it? But as it stands at the moment, flexible working is looking quite strong. It's favourable to employees, which is great. And then I think we've probably spoken about this because we've very much had a conversation, but some of the issues that I see are people coming with a bit of situation that just needs a very informal conversation, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, we've got to instigate this and we've got to instigate that and we've got to get this person involved. And sometimes it's just not necessary. People aren't asking the world, they're just asking for a bit of informal support, whether that's just a later start for the next 4 weeks, or whether that's just, can I not work in the office on that afternoon because I need to take my son to an appointment? We're not asking for massive things. I think as well that managers not checking in on people is a really big issue. I get a lot of people that come to me and they're like, oh, she was really interested, really supportive, but now we're 12 months in and she's not asked how such a body's doing. She's not asked if I'm okay, and she's not asked this. So that lack of check-ins, I think, and it's not on purpose most of the time, it's just by nature of the environment, nature of the game. Things get busy, and I think people think, oh, that's done now, that box has been ticked, that person's fine. But actually things are ever changing, and the environment changes for people when they're living with health conditions as well. Comparisons, as I just mentioned, thinking, oh well, if I say yes to her flexible working request, I've got to say yes to his. That's not the case. It's all addressed on its own merit. Again, I know we spoke about this, having assumptions, thinking, oh, that person can cope, or well, she should be in work, why does she need to leave because her dependent's 21 years of age? It's not necessarily reflective of the situation. So people having assumptions and having judgments about things, I think, is not very helpful, but it happens all the time. And then again, asking, what support do you need right now? Like I said before, I'm at the moment leaving work to take Ezra to Seoul. If that couldn't happen, then I would have to book annual leave. And that just feels so unnecessary for the sake of an hour out of the day. So I find that those are areas, I think, that if people are aware of when they're having that informal conversation, just to be aware of the language, I think will be quite useful. Because sometimes I think line managers are like, oh right, okay, this seems really formal now, and it just doesn't need to be. So not that it should be the employee offering reassurance to the line manager, but sometimes it needs to happen because line managers can just run away and everything is 120 miles an hour and it's just unnecessary. And then also, I think, that's it. I think you'll be pleased to know she's finished now. We can stop 40 minutes later. Yeah. I think that's probably a bit of a pit stop with all of this workplace support options. What I find is an issue for line managers, and then passing that information on might be useful for individuals to be aware of that going forward in whatever support it is that they need. But however you're going to send this out, Rebecca, I'll be happy to add my LinkedIn on there if people want to reach out to me and ask for some advice, because as much as we're all able to access ACAS support, sometimes it's just helpful to speak to someone who gets it, who understands what it looks like, and having worked across multiple industries, I think is quite useful for me to be able to offer advice to people, because I know what works and what doesn't work in different situations. So yeah, if you've got any questions, then I'm happy to stay on and have a conversation. It sounds like you're probably in quite a good place with your situation at the moment, but
we're having it on a 6-monthly review, so they'll review and see how it's going in 6 months.
Okay. The only thing I would say about that is, so what can happen in the eyes of the law is, if you have an arrangement, whether it's, even if on paper it's a temporary arrangement, if you do it for so long, it then becomes an applied term and condition, which means that no matter what that piece of paper says, it doesn't mean anything in practice. If you're able to work from home for 6-12 months and not have any performance issues, then if they were to take that away from you, you would have a really good case to fight against for that, because it becomes an implied term to your working arrangement that you've done it so successfully for so long. So I could
have said that if I had have wanted completely remote working and not even doing one day.
Yeah,
I could I rang ACAS and they didn't mention anything about that.
Yeah, it's really tricky because it does depend on what's written in your policy, but in terms of flexible working is flexible working. Businesses only have a certain number of reasons to refuse, and now the law works much more favourably towards employees than it does to employers. So if I've got some head teachers that only want to agree to half of the request and they want to trial it for 6 months, and that is absolutely fine. But just so you know, at the end of that 6 months, if this situation has been working successfully, it's going to be very difficult for you to say, we can't do this anymore. Yeah. So a trial is a trial, and it's great. It's an opportunity for you to prove it works. It's an opportunity for them to prove it doesn't work, if that's what they want to do. But ultimately, if there are no performance concerns at the end of your 6 months trial, then they're going to be in a very sticky situation to say, no, we just want you back in the office now.
Yeah.
So yeah, just come back to me whenever it finishes, and I'll be happy to help.
I'm hoping it. Yeah, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah. I think so. If you've said that they've reflected on the process and how how that's worked and what their thought process is on it, then I think that's probably quite big for an organisation to admit that. So I think it sounds like you definitely will be fine, and it'll all be great going forward. But I would say that if you are able to maintain your performance with your current working situation, then I think that's quite positive. I don't think there would be any reason for them to be able to justify taking that away from you.
Yeah, I feel like since they've in this new strategy and restructuring that they've done as a company, it's made all the team leaders be very much more vigilant of what is written in the policies, and they don't want to step out of line either. Whereas before, I think they were given a bit more, like you say, flexibility to make the decision as the team lead. But because up until now, I've been able to take my son's hospital appointments as on the HR system. I put it on as an appointment. I provide a letter, and there's been no issue. But now my team leader said, "Oh, I shouldn't have really been doing that. It should have either been annual leave or time in lieu." So now what I'm doing is, if I know he's got his 6-monthly the appointment that takes all afternoon with the echo, the consultant, the genetics, everything, and then my other son has his annual scan to keep an eye on him. will be there all afternoon.
Yeah.
So I know I give, overwork so much that I've just like made a note of all the time that I've done over, and I'm just taking the afternoon in lieu because they owe me that.
Exactly.
So I just write
definitely.
it all down and claim it back that way.
Yeah, definitely. I would.
Because annual leave, like you said,
do the same.
it's unfair to use your annual leave.
Yeah, it's not great. It isn't great, and I know it depends on circumstances. Like my partner, he has a very small family business and there's about 20 employees. If there was someone to take time all the time because they had appointments or whatever, then there's a massive impact on the team because it is such a small business. But they are still very fair in how they approach it. But it doesn't mean to say that it should be any different for anyone else. I think, yes, there is consideration to the impact on service, but ultimately we are all human. We all do have our own things going on, whether it's our kids, small, big, whether it's our parents, whether it's our neighbor. Like, we're there all the time. Like, we've got a WhatsApp chat on our road. There's only 5 houses on our road. There's a guy that lives, he's very much in a wheelchair. His wife looks after him, but they're elderly. She'll text and she'll be like, please help, Stan's fallen. And you'll see us, one of us will be running down the street. Like, it would break my heart if my manager was like, yeah, you can't be doing that. You can't be going out and helping your neighbour. Like, I'm there for 10 minutes, but some organisations are like that. They expect, if you're not on Teams, I've worked in a business, a very, very famous business, who are like, if you're not on Teams, you're not alive. You're not working. You're like, what? Really? I've had some managers come to me and say, oh, they're on Do Not Disturb for 15 minutes. Well, maybe they're on Do Not Disturb for 15 minutes because they've got something going on. It's not because they're just sitting in front of the TV. There's just such an assumption that people aren't working and, everyone's out to take the mick, and that's just not the case. For most people, it isn't anyway, not in my experience. So